I found my wife's secret affair with her boss, and it's cost us over $200, $0 in legal fees and property disputes. Just when I thought I was finally getting our lives back, she suddenly claims our house is still hers after forging my signature. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. Honestly, I thought I knew everything about my wife, Emily. We'd been together for 8 years, married for 5, and I always believed we had a solid, if somewhat typical marriage. She was the kind of woman who always looked flawless, perfect hair, designer clothes, the whole package. She seemed to have it all together. But then, out of nowhere, I stumbled upon something that shattered that illusion entirely. It all started a few months back. Emily had been acting a little strange, more secretive, more distant. She'd come home late from work more often, sometimes smelling like perfume I didn't recognize. She'd brush off my questions, saying she was just working late or having drinks with her boss, Mark. I didn't think much of it at first. I trusted her. Besides, I was busy with my own job, trying to keep everything afloat financially. We had a decent life, but lately, money had been tight and I was stressed out more than usual. The first real clue came when I noticed her phone was always in her hand, more than usual. She'd hide it when I entered the room, and her texts seemed more flirtatious than professional. I brushed it off, telling myself I was paranoid, but then I caught her one night. I was going through her phone, something I never do, but I was just curious, and I saw messages between her and Mark that went beyond professional chatter. They were talking about meeting up after hours, sharing intimate details, and even discussing their secret moments together. I felt my stomach drop. My wife was having an affair with her boss. I couldn't believe it. I sat there, stunned, staring at the screen. I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and a deep sadness I couldn't shake. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the evidence was undeniable. The messages weren't just friendly banter. They were intimate, personal, downright suggestive. I knew I had to confront her, but I also knew I needed more proof before I did. So I started digging. Over the next few days, I noticed other things. Her phone kept disappearing, she was more evasive when I asked about work, and her schedule seemed to change on a dime. I also stumbled upon a receipt for a hotel reservation in her name, paid with a card I didn't recognize. That was the final nail. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I decided to follow her one evening when she said she'd be working late. I needed to see this with my own eyes. What I saw that night hit me like a truck. She met Mark at a hotel downtown and they went inside holding hands. They didn't seem to care if anyone saw them. I watched from a distance, heart pounding, feeling a mix of rage and heartbreak. That moment I knew for sure. My wife was cheating on me, and she didn't even seem to care about how much she was hurting me. It was like I was invisible to her, just some obstacle she had to hide from. I didn't confront her that night. Instead, I went home, sat in the dark, and tried to process everything. I felt betrayed in a way I never thought possible. All those years I thought we were building a life together, but she was out there with her boss, sneaking around, lying to my face. The worst part, she'd always been bitchy about me working late or being distant, yet she was doing the same thing behind my back. It was like she had no respect for me or what we had. That realization made me feel sick. The next morning, I woke up with a burning need to confront her, but I also knew I had to be smart about it. I couldn't just accuse her without evidence. I needed to plan my next move carefully. I started gathering everything I could, screenshots of the messages, receipts, her strange behavior, and prepared myself for what was coming. I was hurt, yes, but I was also furious. How could she lie to my face for so long? How could she pretend everything was fine? I thought I knew her, but I was wrong. She'd been cheating on me with her boss, Mark, for months, maybe longer. I didn't sleep that night. When she finally came home, I was waiting for her in the living room. She looked surprised, almost annoyed when she saw me. I could tell she was trying to act normal, but I wasn't buying it. I knew everything. I was ready to ask her straight out, to hear her lie if she could, and then decide what to do next. What I didn't realize then was how much my world was about to change forever. I took a deep breath and looked her straight in the eyes. She was still trying to play her innocent act, brushing her hair back and giving me that fake smile she always used when she wanted to manipulate a situation. I kept my voice steady, but inside I was boiling. Emily, I know about Mark. I saw the messages, the hotel receipt, everything. How long has this been going on? Her eyes flickered, and for a second I thought she might deny it, but then she scoffed and rolled her eyes. Oh, please, you're overreacting. Those messages are just work emails, nothing more. You're just paranoid because you're stressed about money. Honestly, I don't know what you want from me. That was her typical response. Blame everything on me, accuse me of being paranoid, paint herself as the victim. But I wasn't buying it. I had enough evidence. And I wasn't about to let her gaslight me. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots. Her face changed then, a flicker of panic or maybe anger, I couldn't tell. She tried to snatch the phone away, but I held it firm. You've been lying to me for months, I said, voice rising slightly. All those nights you said you were working late, the calls you hide, the way you'd avoid my questions. It was all for him, wasn't it? She looked furious now, her lips pressed into a thin line. Look, I don't know what you think you saw, but Mark and I are just friends. It's not what you're making it out to be. You're jealous, insecure, and honestly, I'm tired of explaining myself to you. I felt a surge of anger. That bitch was good with her lies, but I knew better. I'd seen her with my own eyes. Friends don't meet up at hotels in secret, I shot back. And I know about the money, too. The way you've been spending on those trips, the jewelry, the designer clothes. All of it while I'm busting my ass trying to keep our house afloat. Her face twisted into a sneer. You think I cheat just for money? Please. I do it because I'm bored, because you're never home, because I deserve more than this dull, miserable life you've given me. Mark makes me feel alive. Maybe you should try to do the same instead of accusing me all the time. That was when I realized she was beyond help. She was manipulative, selfish, and she didn't care about the damage she'd done. I was furious, but I also felt something else, deep sadness. I'd built my life around her, believed in us, and now I was standing here questioning everything. How long had she been lying? Was I just blind to it all? I told her I needed some time to think, and I left the room. I went to my office and started to process everything. The shock was giving way to cold, calculated anger. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind for so long. I'd always thought we were a team, that we had a future together. Now, I wasn't sure I even knew who she was. In the coming days, I kept replaying that night in my head, trying to figure out my next move. I knew I couldn't just walk away without consequences. She'd betrayed me in ways I couldn't ignore, emotionally, financially, and now legally. I'd heard about how she'd been forging my signature on property papers, trying to claim our house as her own. That was the next big shock. I found out she'd been secretly working with a lawyer, trying to manipulate the legal system to keep the house, even after everything. It was a mess I didn't see coming. The house was our biggest asset, and she was trying to steal it from under me. I had no choice but to fight back to protect what was mine. I started consulting lawyers, digging into the property records and gathering evidence of her forgery. Meanwhile, I couldn't stop thinking about how she'd lied so effortlessly, how she'd gone from loving wife to someone who'd betray me for her own selfish needs. Every day felt like a new betrayal. I'd work all day, then come home to more lies and manipulation. She'd tell me I was overreacting, that I was paranoid, that I was making things up. But I had enough now. I knew the truth, and I was ready to fight for it. I wasn't going to let her ruin me, not after everything we'd built. The more I dug, the more I realized just how deep her deception went. She'd even started talking about divorce, claiming I was the one who was unstable, that I was jealous and insecure. But I knew her game. She'd been planning her escape, using her affair and her lies to get what she wanted: our house, the money, and maybe even a clean break from the life she claimed she hated. I couldn't let her get away with it, not without a fight. I was determined to expose her, to make her pay for everything she'd done. I'd been blindsided, yes, but I was not going down without a fight. The coming days would be chaos, I knew that. But I also knew I had to stand my ground for myself, for whatever was left of the life I thought was real. After I started digging into her affairs and her legal manipulations, I realized how much she'd been planning behind my back. She was smart, too smart for her own good. The moment I found out she'd forged my signature on property documents, I knew I had to act fast. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was trying to take everything I had worked for: our house, our savings, the little stability I'd managed to hold onto while trying to keep us afloat. I hired a lawyer immediately. It was not cheap, but I needed someone who knew the ins and outs of property law and forgery. In the meantime, I started gathering everything: texts, emails, receipts, even hidden bank statements. I didn't want her to have any room to deny what she'd done. I also hired a private investigator because I wanted to see what she was up to when I wasn't around. Turns out, she was meeting Mark almost daily, sometimes at night, always with a new excuse about work events or urgent meetings. One day, I found myself sitting across from my lawyer, staring at the evidence I'd collected. The forgery, the secret meetings, the money she'd been funneling into accounts I didn't even know existed. I was furious, but I had to keep my cool. I knew she was manipulative and would try to spin everything in her favor, as she always did. But I also realized I couldn't let her get away with it. I was tired of being the fool, tired of feeling like I was losing everything I'd built. My lawyer told me I had a strong case, especially with the forged signatures. She warned me that Emily would probably fight dirty, maybe even accuse me of being controlling or paranoid, classic gaslighting tactics. But I was prepared. I wanted justice, not just for the house but for the years I'd lost trusting her. I also learned she'd been secretly draining our joint account, spending thousands on her affair, and even trying to refinance the house without my knowledge. Meanwhile, Emily kept spinning her lies. She'd call me crazy or jealous, accuse me of controlling her life. She'd say I was just upset because I couldn't handle her success or her independence. That was her way of deflecting. She'd claim she loved me, but then she'd turn around and say she needed space, that I was suffocating her. I saw through every lie, but it still hurt. It hurt so much that the woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, was capable of such deception. The legal process was brutal. She hired her own lawyer, and suddenly it was a full-blown legal war. The court dates kept piling up, and every day I felt like I was fighting a losing battle. She was relentless, trying to spin stories about how I was abusive or controlling, trying to paint herself as the victim. But I had the evidence, and I kept pushing forward. I wanted her to pay for what she'd done, for the betrayal, for the lies, for trying to steal my home. One day, I caught her red-handed trying to forge even more documents. I had someone watching her, and I got proof: video footage of her sitting at a desk, tampering with papers, looking nervous as hell. That was it. I knew I had everything I needed to put an end to her schemes. I handed everything over to my lawyer, and she immediately filed for a restraining order. Emily was furious. She called me names, yelled, and even threatened to ruin me financially if she couldn't have her way. But I didn't care. I was done playing nice. The fallout was messy. She moved out of the house temporarily, but then she started claiming it was still hers because she had some legal rights. That's when I found out she'd been forging my signature on papers to transfer ownership. She'd even gone so far as to get a lawyer to claim she had a right to stay in the house because of some fake joint ownership she'd created. The court saw through her lies, but it was a reminder of how far she was willing to go to get what she wanted. Meanwhile, I was left with a sinking feeling. How could someone I loved so much turn into someone so cold, so manipulative? I started questioning everything. The years we spent together, the vows we made, the trust I'd given her. It all felt like a lie now. But I also knew I had to move forward. I couldn't let her destroy me completely. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, but I was determined to fight for what was rightfully mine. The hardest part was realizing that the woman I'd once believed in, the woman I'd spent so many years trusting, was capable of such betrayal. It changed how I saw everything. I used to think love was about honesty and loyalty. Now I see it's about protecting yourself, about knowing when to stand your ground and fight for what's yours. I learned that some people are just not worth the pain they cause, no matter how much you love them. I still have a long road ahead, but I'm not giving up. I've come too far, and I refuse to let her win. The house is still in dispute, and the legal fees keep piling up, but I'm holding on. I just wish I'd seen the signs earlier, but I guess you never really know someone until they show you who they really are. The legal battle dragged on for months, and during that time my life felt like it was on hold. Every morning I woke up with a knot in my stomach, knowing that Emily was still out there, trying to manipulate the system, lying through her teeth, and doing everything she could to keep her grip on the house and whatever else she thought she deserved. I had to keep my guard up constantly, watching my back, making sure I had enough evidence to counter her every move. One of the most shocking moments came when I discovered she'd been secretly working with a lawyer, someone she'd hired behind my back. She'd been paying him hush money to draft documents, to forge signatures, and to try to sway the court in her favor. I never thought I'd see the day when she'd betray me so openly, and it made me realize just how far she was willing to go. She was trying to set herself up as the rightful owner of everything we'd built, even if it meant lying, cheating, or even risking criminal charges. I remember sitting in that lawyer's office, staring at the evidence I'd collected, realizing how much of her deception was rooted in greed and selfishness. She'd always been bitchy about money, how I didn't make enough, how she deserved a better life. But I never thought she'd go this far. I started to understand that she was more than just a cheating wife. She was someone who'd do anything to get what she wanted. That realization made me angrier than ever. Meanwhile, I kept pushing forward with my own legal case. I filed for full custody of the house, citing her forgery, her affair, and her attempts to manipulate the property legally. I also brought in financial experts to evaluate her spending, her trips, her jewelry, the payments she'd made to her lawyer, and they confirmed she'd been draining our joint account for months. The court saw her pattern of deception, and I could tell they were starting to lean in my favor. Still, I knew she'd fight dirty, and I had to be prepared for anything. She was losing her temper more often, lashing out at me, calling me crazy and possessive, trying to turn everyone against me. I had friends and family who saw through her act, but some, unfortunately, believed her lies. That was the hardest part, knowing that her manipulations were working on some people, making me look like the villain. But I refused to back down. I had the truth on my side, and I was determined to see it through. One night I found her trying to sneak into the house with a fake key. I caught her red-handed, and she started screaming, claiming she had every right to be there because she was still the owner. That's when I realized her plan was more elaborate than I thought. She wasn't just trying to steal the house. She was trying to erase me from the picture entirely. I told her to leave, and she called me a controlling asshole, but I didn't care. I had finally had enough of her lies. The more she pushed, the more I saw her true colors. She'd always been bitchy and manipulative, but now she was downright dangerous. She was willing to lie, forge documents, and even threaten me to get her way. I started documenting everything, every threat, every lie, every sneaky move she made. I knew that eventually the truth would come out, and when it did, she'd have no choice but to face the consequences. At the same time, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of loss. I'd spent almost a decade building a life with her, dreaming of a future, and now it was all crumbling apart. Every day I questioned if I'd missed the signs or if I'd been blind to who she really was. I'd always believed she loved me, but her actions told a different story. That realization hurt more than anything. Despite all this, I stayed focused. I knew I had to protect myself and my rights. I started planning my next steps carefully, talking to my lawyer, gathering more evidence, preparing for the inevitable court showdown. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. I was done being the victim in her game. It was time to fight back and take control of my life again. In the midst of all this chaos, I also started reflecting on what I'd learned. Trust doesn't come easy anymore. Love isn't enough when someone's willing to lie and cheat their way through life. And most importantly, I realized I had to put myself first, my safety, my property, my sanity. I'd given her too much of myself and she'd wasted it all. But I wasn't going to let her win. Not this time. I was going to stand my ground no matter what it took. The court process was dragging on, but I could see a light at the end of the tunnel. My lawyer kept telling me I had a solid case, especially with the forged signatures and her attempts to manipulate the property documents. Still, I knew Emily wouldn't go down without a fight. She was nothing if not cunning, and I had to stay vigilant. Every day brought new surprises, more lies, more manipulations, and more attempts to twist the story in her favor. One of the most shocking moments came when I discovered she'd been secretly transferring money into fake accounts she set up in her name. She'd been siphoning off thousands, maybe even tens of thousands, by forging signatures on bank documents she'd hidden from me. I found out through a forensic accountant I hired to trace her spending. The extent of her deception was staggering. She'd been planning her escape for months, maybe even longer, while pretending everything was fine. Her bitchy attitude hadn't changed either. She'd call me every name in the book, controlling, insecure, jealous, and accuse me of trying to keep her prisoner. She'd say I was the reason she was bored and unhappy, even though I'd been busting my ass to keep us afloat financially. That was her way of deflecting from the real issue, her betrayal, her greed, her manipulations. She didn't want to take responsibility for any of it. Instead, she tried to paint me as the villain. One day, I found out she was planning to move out of the city with Mark, trying to start fresh somewhere new. She'd already bought a house in another state, using the money she'd stolen from us. I couldn't believe how far she'd gone. She was willing to abandon everything we'd built, just to be with him. I felt a mix of anger and heartbreak. It was like she was trying to erase me completely, to rewrite her life on her own terms, regardless of the damage she caused. Meanwhile, I was working with my lawyer to get a court order to freeze her accounts and prevent her from transferring any more money. I also filed a motion for full custody of the house, arguing that her forging my signature and her attempts to claim ownership were clear signs she was unfit to control the property. The judge saw through her lies pretty quickly, especially after I presented the evidence of her forged documents and her secret bank transfers. As the hearing approached, Emily's attitude became even more hostile. She'd scream at me during court sessions, calling me possessive and abusive, trying to turn the court against me. But I had the evidence, and I had my lawyer who was relentless. I knew this was about more than just the house. It was about protecting what little dignity I had left after everything she'd done. One particularly tense day in court, Emily finally snapped. She accused me of controlling her, of spying on her, of trying to ruin her life. That was her final desperate move, to make me look like the bad guy. But the judge wasn't buying it. He looked directly at her and said, "Your actions show a pattern of dishonesty and manipulation. The evidence clearly indicates you've been forging documents and draining assets. This court will not allow you to continue this scheme." That moment gave me a small glimmer of hope, but I knew the fight wasn't over yet. On top of all that, I had to deal with the emotional toll. Every night I lay awake wondering how I got here, how someone I loved could betray me so thoroughly. The sadness mixed with anger, and I felt like I was losing part of myself. But at the same time, I realized I was stronger than I thought. I'd refused to crumble under her lies, refused to let her control me anymore. Now, I was finally beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. The court was leaning in my favor, and I was confident that, with enough evidence, I could regain control of my life and protect what's rightfully mine. Still, I couldn't ignore the fact that she'd tried to destroy everything. Our home, our savings, my reputation. That kind of betrayal stays with you, but I was determined not to let her win. I had to keep fighting, not just for the house, but for my own sanity and dignity. The road ahead was still long, but I was ready for whatever came next. The final court dates came and went faster than I expected, but the outcome was clear. The judge saw through Emily's lies, her forged signatures, her secret bank transfers, her attempts to manipulate the property, and sided with me. The court granted me full ownership of the house, froze her accounts, and issued a restraining order preventing her from any further interference. It was a hard-fought victory, but it felt like I finally got some justice after months of betrayal and chaos. In the aftermath, Emily moved out of the city, trying to disappear with Mark, but the damage was done. I stayed behind, picking up the pieces of what was left. The house was mine again, but I knew I'd never truly recover from the emotional scars. Still, I learned a lot from this nightmare, about trust, about greed, and about the importance of protecting yourself when someone you love turns out to be someone you barely recognize. Looking back, I realize I was naive to think love could conquer everything. Emily's actions revealed her true nature: selfish, manipulative, and willing to lie and cheat her way through life. It hurt to see her like that, but it also opened my eyes. I learned to be more cautious, to trust my instincts, and to never ignore the signs of someone's true character. Financially, I also learned a tough lesson. Always be vigilant about joint accounts, legal documents, and who you trust with your assets. Her forgery could have cost me everything, but I caught it in time. It's a reminder that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who can do the most damage if they're determined enough. I've moved on, though I still feel the sting of betrayal. I've started rebuilding my life, focusing on my career and my mental health. It's not easy. There are days when I feel angry or discouraged, but I know I'm better off without her. The house is paid off, my savings are intact, and I've learned to value myself more. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this: trust is fragile, and sometimes the people we love the most can hurt us the deepest. Be vigilant, protect your assets, and don't ignore the red flags. Love is important, but self-respect and self-protection come first. And if you ever find yourself in a situation like mine, remember, you're stronger than you think and there's a way out. You just have to fight for it.